The Weight of Silence, Book 1, Song 3, The Heavier Quiet. The seal alone could stop a breath. Chapter 6, The Notice. The courier came before noon on day 7 of Dusk Hollow, the autumn season of the town's calendar. Dust lay on his cloak in a new pattern, the road's story written on him. He stood at the courier's stone, waiting to hail those he had messages for. People went about their errands and carefully avoided the courier's eye. Fearing he had some cutting news for them, "Northwind," he said when Gage approached. No greeting beyond the name, no apology under it. He held out a letter heavier than the last, stiff paper, broad margins, red wax with the larger crest. Troop sealed. Official. Not a brother's letter. It was the kind of letter that traveled with silence in its wake. "Straight home," the courier said. The same words he had heard in Dawnspring 2 seasons ago. Heavier now. Gage took the packet with both hands. He knew what the seal meant without being taught. A notice that is not a death letter. It would likely speak of contact lost, a status unknown, and the last route written in a single clean line. He tucked it inside his vest and set his palm flat. One for taking, one for keeping, one for delivering. He did not say the counts aloud. The square did not need to hear them again. He did not detour. He did not slow. He kept to the bright stones and the center of the lane, and let his feet do the honest work while his thoughts did none. Upon arriving home, he opened the front door with his hand still on his vest and stepped into the coolness of the house. Lyra was at the table with the morning's washing draped over a chair back. Her hands paused above a shirt as though they had forgotten what hands did. She looked up at the shift of air, not at him, and then at him because the shift had brought him with it. Her eyes were steady and tired, like flickering coals. "From Asyria?" she asked. "Because mothers make room for hope, even when it is small." Gage set the packet on the table and slid it forward so she could see the seal before touching it. "Troop sealed," he said. The words were a shape he could hold without them breaking. Her fingers hovered above the wax, then settled on the paper itself. "Your father," she said, and her voice found the doorway before he did. Theron came in from the yard with work still on him, sleeves pushed, rope marks, and dust on his forearms. He looked first at Gage's face, then at the packet, and the lines at the corners of his mouth set a fraction deeper. He did not sit. He did not tell anyone else to sit. He stood at the table and broke the seal with his thumb in one clean motion. The wax, pressed to promise privacy, gave way. Things made to be opened must be opened. He read with the stillness he used for orders, eyes moving like a man counting paces. Lyra waited without touching his sleeve. Gage stood with his hands at his sides and felt the absence of Alaric's missing letter in his vest, like a bruise he had learned to bear without grimacing. He found the shallow north notch by habit and let it rest against his cheek. Theron lifted the page enough that Lyra could see without taking it from him. She drew breath and held it, like air might be rationed, and she didn't want to take more than her share. The words were clean and official. Gage Northwind, missing in action. Last contact. River crossing on a patrol road. Minor skirmish reported. Unit scattered, regrouping incomplete. To be assumed neither fallen nor safe until proven otherwise. The kind of language that claims truth but refuses to tell what you want to know. Lyra put a hand on the table and did not lean on it. "Not fallen," she said, and in that space there was a small, ridiculous joy. A room she could still enter. "Not fallen." Theron's jaw worked once. "Not accounted for," he said. It was not a correction. It was a second line drawn under the first. Gage's mouth opened and closed before he could stop it. The sentence that tried to form came in parts. "I had his letter. I was told to go straight home. I didn't." It was brief and small and entirely made of the past, and it would land on this moment like a stone on thin glass. Lyra's fingers went from the table to the edge of the paper and back, a small loop she may not have noticed she was making. "We write," she said, finding a task the way people do when they are told to wait. "We write Ranger Captain Hale. We ask what is known and what can be spared." Theron nodded once. We will send a letter by morning. He folded the notice along its crease, a fold already there from when it left the officer's table. As if the paper had practiced being folded before it had a reason, and set it near the breadboard. Gage swallowed. The words he could not force from his lips stayed firm and would not leave. They pressed together and grew heavy, leadened. It was a dishonorable weight he had chosen without even knowing why. He tried to set the words in order as he set field gear. Line out the truth, tie it fast, present it. His plan to confess collapsed under the sight of his mother's small joy and his father's straight back. His thumb found the bead that marked his promise to keep his speech clean of lies, and he felt the grain of its carving. Silence is not a lie, he told himself. Then the sentence felt unclean, because silence used as cover is not the same as silence used as care. He started, and Lyra's head turned toward him with such hope that he had to turn the words into something else before they reached the air. I can take the letter at first light, he said. Ranger Captain Hale will be on yard rounds. He will see it sooner if I put it in his hand. Karen looked at him long enough to read what could be read, and then nodded again. At first light, he agreed. We'll set the words tonight. Lyra moved then with tidy purpose, not because tidiness would save them, but because it would save the minutes until they could do nothing but sit with the waiting. She collected the washed shirts and folded them with the kind of care you give a sleeping child, a smoothing of fabric, a press along a seam as if the seam might notice and be grateful. She wiped the table and set out 3 cups, though none of them were thirsty. She lit a lamp, though the light was not fading yet. Gage watched her do these things and realized he had never before understood how a person could build a shelter out of tasks until he saw her at work. Asyria is clever, Lyra said, half to herself, as if the room needed reminding. He reads the land and the water. He would not be careless. Gage closed his eyes and the picture of Asyria's letter slipping from his vest, landing somewhere, and being blown away bloomed in his mind. He opened his eyes because closing them did nothing good. He said. He would not. Both sentences were true, and neither touched the thing in his chest that had started to splinter. After they drafted the letter, with Theron dictating and Lyra asking soft questions that made the words cleaner without making them less, the house fell into a quiet that wasn't peace. Gage carried the sealed reply to his room and set it on the desk where he kept his maps and charcoal. He turned the envelope face down so the seal would not look at him, then face up because hiding from it seemed childish, then slid it under a map. A map's job is to anchor things to the world. More than anything, Gage needed to anchor Asyria to the world. He stood by the window and watched the lane except the evening. Neighbors moved without looking toward their house. They would look later, when news turned from rumor to fact. He could feel his father in the other room, the weight of a man organizing tasks against a day that had defied organization. He could feel his mother moving with the lamp from table to shelf to table again, the flame settling each time as if learning its job anew. Dip's knock came as 2 polite taps and one that missed the wood and hit the door jamb. If you don't want company, he said through the door, say so, and I'll pretend not to be offended for drama's sake. Gage opened. Dip took one look at his face and rearranged his own. Official? He asked. He asked it softly enough to step over. Missing, Gage said. The word didn't break him, but it didn't sit well either. I'm sorry, Dip said, then added, because he could not help himself, which is a useless sentence, but I wanted it said. He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, then stood away so he would not seem to be leaning on the news itself. His eyes slid to the table. Is that for Hale? I deliver it in the morning, Gage said. Do you want me to walk with you? Gage pictured Dip at his shoulder while he crossed the yard and handed the letter up. He pictured Hale's nod and the line of students pretending not to watch. He pictured his own jaw and did not like any of the angles. I'll go alone, he said, and Dip did not argue, which told Gage he understood. If you need to say a loud thing in a quiet voice, Dip said, my ears are very good at that. He left after a short silence, that had not been awkward until Gage noticed it had ended. When the house settled, the lamp low, the cups washed and set on their sides, and the latch securing the door for the evening, Gage lay down without undressing and counted his breaths. The counting didn't help. He stopped at 9 because 9 felt like a number that would accuse him if he touched it again. Sleep came and went like a guest unsure of its welcome. When it was finally morning enough to call it that, he rose, washed, and twisted his locks back into clean lines. He checked each bead by touch, vows, small milestones, and the compass-marked circle that had been his brother's, honor-worn and never counted. Alaric's bead tugged a lock forward. He let it. The unworn bead sat in his pocket, perfect and insistent. He took the letter to the academy under a sky that had decided to be plain. Hale was already in the south yard, walking the line the way a farmer walks a fence. Gage went to him without going through the main door. Ranger Captain Hale saw him and read the situation with the economy of a man who knew grief's many forms and didn't need them named. "From your family?" Hale asked. "From my family," Gage said and held out the letter, requesting all that can be spared. Hale took it. "I'll see it to the right hands." He looked at Gage the way you look at a tree to find out whether the wind has damaged it or just made it stronger. "You're welcome to drill or not drill. Both are honest choices." He nodded, then felt the space where a different letter should have lived, and knew this notice would always live there instead. "I'll drill," Gage said, because if he did not hold a bow, he would hold the weight of his thoughts, and they were heavier. He signed the chalkboard, habit catching him even now, and took his lane. He set his feet. He read the elm leaves. He loosed when ready. The arrows landed where they should, without making anything else feel right. Word ran along the yard without anyone saying it. Dip drifted to the neighboring lane and stood there without commentary. The first year, on the far end, looked Gage's way once, and then looked back at their own target with the kind of attention you give a thing when you want to honor someone else by being steady yourself. At midday, he went home. Lyra met him at the door with the breakfast cups washed again, because washing them twice was something to do. Theron had gone to the marshal's hall to speak to a man who knew the river crossings by name. They ate the way you eat when you can taste the food, but the food isn't the point. By afternoon, there was nothing left to do to keep from knowing. Lyra sat with her mending and mended the same seam twice. Gage sat with a map of a battlefront and traced patrol roads he did not know and could not read. The unworn bead warmed against his palm. He had fallen into the habit of holding it. He felt the circle under his thumb and made himself let go. When evening drew its line, he faced the mirror, glass, not tin. He met his own eyes the way he met a target center without flinching. "Northwind's lead," he said. It was not comfort, it was a direction. Still, he could not quiet the echo of the direction he did not take, the one that would require speaking the truth. He opened his mouth to add the rest. "I lost your letter, Alaric." The word lost sat on his tongue like a pebble he could neither spit out nor swallow. He pictured Lyra's hand on the table, finding a loop to travel so she would not have to fall. He pictured Theron folding the notice along the crease that had been set at an officer's desk far from their house. He closed his mouth, and the sentence that might have followed became the air again. Silence settled. It wasn't a lack, it was the only choice he knew. He lifted his hand to his temple and found his brother's bead by feel. He let it rest forward. He did not take the unworn bead from his pocket. He did not think about fastening it in. He didn't think about larger promises. He held to the one he had just made to an empty room. Carry this weight with them. Do not break them further by unburdening your own conscience. He blew out the lamp. The house did not sleep. Neither did he, not really. When sleep came, it came in pieces. In each piece, he tried to tell the secret of losing the letter and couldn't. He woke with his jaw tight from holding the words behind his teeth. Morning would come again. He would carry the ache of waiting until something heavier than waiting arrived. Until it did, he would keep the silence he had chosen and try to view it as a vow instead of a hiding place. He whispered nothing, and that nothing was his vow. The songs are only beginning. Add your voice. Like, comment, and subscribe. and walk with us as new threads are woven. The tapestry grows with every listener who joins it.